high achievers are trauma informed. And so at some point in their maturation process, they had such an impact, right, in terms of the world's perspective on who they were or who they could be or who they shouldn't be. And all of that creates these deficit limited beliefs in the high achiever self-concept, meaning that they start to really adopt the belief that they inherently are not good enough. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, the Legacy Edition, where conscious leaders unite to unlock their highest potential so collectively we can change the way the game is being played. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, changing the way this game is being played. And oh yes, folks, that's right. We are in the summer of conscious leadership here at the LLP. I got Tracey Allen riding shotgun back in with me this week as my co-pilot. Tracey, how was your week? How you feeling?
Great. It is steaming hot, though, I must say, in Gatineau, Quebec area, and yeah, it's really warm, but it's awesome, right? It's the weather. We can't complain as Canadians. I mean, we got to take the heat.
Yeah.
We only get a little bit of it, so we take it when it comes. So good. Everything's awesome. How about you?
It's quite appropriate. Here we're in the summer of heat in terms of this hot concept and topic that we're unpacking around conscious leadership at the LLP. And we are experiencing a heat wave north of the border right now. And this is nothing our thick Canadian blood is used to, let me tell you. But that's all right. I know you and I have had some time at the lake to balance out that equation. And yeah, we're back in studio here today where it's cool, but not on the mic. We have one hot show in store for you. We had all this amazing feedback rolling in. We're in the year of co-creation here at the LLP, and we're asking all of you for that feedback in terms of how this conscious leadership concept is resonating. We're hearing that you're absolutely loving it. In fact, we heard last week's show was really valuable in terms of Tracey thinking to pull back the curtains on my NLP mastery a little bit. We did receive some feedback, though, that you wanted more. You wanted us to actually go to that next step of depth we kept referring to in terms of this, mindset, strategy, architecture work that I described. I feel like I did a really good job of unpacking why I love NLP and why it's so powerful. But the example that we gave was, a little off the cuff. So today we decided to press pause on the guest and come back in here, me and you, right, Trey, so that we could answer that call and be responsive to this incredible feedback that we're getting.
Absolutely. I think we just kind of got to the tail end and we kind of got a short version of that, but I know you have more to give us on that. So I want to bring that out so that our guests can really, really practically, technically see how that kind of works in practice, right? When we go into a session, what the expectations could be when you come out, and kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, so I just stepped off the keynote stage over at Team Nokia. This morning, I gave a keynote on the empowered mindset, how to play your biggest impact game resiliently for the Strong Her organization at Team Nokia. And this is where I went really deep, right? I went pretty deep and pretty broad in terms of being able to get into some real-time contextual examples of how we actually go to the mental gym and start to really do this type of work with these high achieving clients that I work with in practice. So did you have an entry point question you wanted to tee up for me?
Yeah, I think we're kind of going back to what you teed up this morning. I think we talked a lot about imposter syndrome, right? So I think women, but I also believe men suffer from this as well. But imposter syndrome kind of percolates through a lot of people. And maybe one that is probably most popular that is a struggle for a lot of us. So if, I'd love for you to walk us through a client that comes in with imposter syndrome and how would you tackle that, to unpack that and help them reframe that mindset architectures to really set them up for their aspirational self or whatever objectives and goals they're trying to achieve. Because we all know that with imposter syndrome, you can get stuck, and it's really hard to see yourself. And you know, you might be feeling lots of roadblocks, but you need help to kind of see yourself for who you really are. And that holding that mirror and all those kind of techniques that you use with your clients, I'd love for you to walk us through one of those.
Well, whether you're male or female, I happen to concur. I have a healthy balance of both in my practice that I've served over the last 20 years. If you're a high achiever, you are definitely having to work yourself through the imposter syndrome at some point along the way in your performance ascension, in your ascension to leadership positions. And I especially think like this is when you really become privy to the fact that you're running on imposter syndrome, like I spoke about this morning, right? Is when you're thrust into those next level, high pressure, high stakes, opportunities or conditions. This does a wonderful job of exposing all the insecurities from underneath the rug of your self-concept. And this is really because high achievers are incredibly external locus of control folk. I think we talked about that on last week's podcast. It looks like striving on the outside looking in, but what's really going on inside of the high achievers' experience is more like surviving in their nervous system. And this is because, I also said last week, high achievers are trauma informed. And so at some point in their maturation process, they had such an impact, right? In terms of the world's perspective on who they were or who they could be or who they shouldn't be. And all of that creates these deficit limited beliefs in the high achiever self-concept, meaning that they start to really adopt the belief that they inherently are not good enough, right? When they get that type of feedback from the leaders that carry the most weight in their environments growing up. And so, this obviously puts us into scarcity in our nervous system. It doesn't register as safety, that's for damn sure, when we are carrying around this type of limited perspective or belief on our worth. And so that's when our brain has to take over. This is when we first start to adopt these high achiever maladaptive strategies, is when the brain has to actually change its pathways in terms of how it's getting its needs met, right? It has to super compensate. We always say the high achiever runs on hyper arousal. They think that's motivation. It's really stress and anxiety. And all of that is because they have to then start to go outside of themselves to get their needs met by the world. And this is really obviously never supposed to be a long-term strategy for success. It's supposed to be coping. Maladaptive means coping in the moment so that our brain can keep us safe and alive, which is its job. And it takes that job very seriously. So because they have such external locus of control, it means that they're giving their power away to the world, seeing the world as the authority in who they are or who they aren't, who they should be or who they shouldn't be. And that's like, again, a very reckless, unsustainable way to lead ourselves, right? It's completely unconscious, that fact that we're actually doing that maladaptive stuff as young children. But where it starts to become problematic is obviously, when we are outsourcing that power and authority to the world, it means that they now get to be the authority in how good or not good we are. And that means that we have no other choice but to wake up every day like we're being shot from the cannon in our nervous system. This is the surviving part of striving, right? So that we can hustle and we can grind and we can prove ourselves to be good enough. And that essentially is the imposter syndrome, right? Imposter syndrome is the result of leading ourselves unconsciously in that way. Because if we're outsourcing all of that authority and power to validate what is true or not true to the world, it means that we don't know what is true or not true about ourselves, because we actually are not learning how to see ourselves. We're giving that power to other people. We're giving them the power to see us, and therefore we become incredibly codependent on needing to prove to them, right, that we are actually good enough. So an example of this, we were talking about one of my clients, Anne, who works in the financial district of Bay Street, downtown Toronto. This was probably about 15 years or so ago. It was like relatively early on in my practice when I was working with high achievers down there. And she came through my door having, she's incredibly successful, all-star individual contributor. She was an absolute expert in the finance world, so much so that she had just been awarded a leadership position for the first time in her life. And yeah, that's right, folks. That's all it took for Anne to be in a complete tailspin in her confidence and her sense of empowerment. I remember plopping down on a chair in front of me and almost a panic attack because she was freaking out about having to give a presentation to her new team the next day. And she was saying things to me like, who am I to lead these other human beings? I've never done this before, Susan. And so that's where the entry point is. That's where I want to freeze the game tape. Okay. It's like everything I was saying last week about how NLP helps me catch a read and then meet my clients where they're at. That's the read I was able to catch, is that Anne was in an incredibly red flag emotional state. She had very high levels of anxiety, some might say panic. And it was because she didn't see herself, right? She had all these limited beliefs that were waking up in her insecurities and her self-concept, being provoked by the fact that she now had to do something that she believed she didn't have the capacity to do because she hadn't done it before. And all of that because, when we have imposter syndrome, who am I, to do this thing I've never done? It means that we don't see what it is that got us into that situation where we were given that opportunity to begin with. This is because we're running on things like perfectionism. I know for her, she was a hardcore people pleaser too. And all of that was what she was using, to control getting that external validation in the form of those perfect outcomes and keeping everybody happy with her at all times. But how possible is that once you become a leader, right? And you are no longer responsible for driving excellent outcomes yourself. Your job now is to create the conditions for your people to drive excellent results. And if you're a leader, you're not keeping everybody happy, right, Trace? Like,
Yep.
you got to hold people accountable. You got to help them find their edges, right? Like, you got to help them grow. It means you got to help them see where they're making mistakes or where their blind spots live. And so all of that obviously was no longer going to be an option for Anne. And because those were the strategies she'd always used to seek control and safety, it had her in a tailspin feeling incredibly unsafe. And so that's where we start when we do this type of unpacking and practicing the pivot from a mindset perspective, is like we just notice how we're feeling in that red flag emotional state. The most important thing for us to do is to practice that awareness consciously. This is what we talked a lot about this morning, actually, in that locker room, that Strong Heart locker room, is that it all starts by deciding consciously to step to the helm in our self-leadership, which means that we are cranking the high beams in our self-awareness, right? So that we actually can calibrate where those red flag emotions are waking up and getting triggered. I always say emotions are intel, right? Like, that's intel. It's showing you where your limited beliefs are hiding out in your self-concept. Once we identified that she was clearly feeling super anxious, and we identified the stressor, right? The situation contextually that was waking that red flag emotional experience up. We were able to see, her having to do something she's never done before, obviously was problematic for her brain and her self-concept, because she had a limited belief hiding out behind all of that was showing up on the play visibly, which was that she believed that she was going to be a failure because she couldn't be perfect. Literally not even possible to be perfect the first time we do anything, but that situation of needing to present to her leadership team, her new leadership team the next day, something which she had never done before in the capacity of being a leader, she believed that she was going to be a failure because she could not possibly present perfectly as a new leader for the first time. And this really is what drives this perfectionist strategy, right? A perfectionist believes that they're only as good as their latest win, and anything less than that perfect win clearly to a perfectionist means that they are a failure, that they are not good enough, which is really what puts them into that deficit emotionally, like we were saying. When we believe that we're not good enough, that registers as not safe inside of our nervous system, inside of our body, because self-worth is at the core of safety for human beings. If we don't believe that we have worth, meaning that we have value to bring to this world, it kind of leaves us in a really dark, deficit, dangerous space and place in our brain, in our nervous system, in our self-concept, right? In our relationship to self, which really, when we're in that deficit of self-worth, means that our brain and our nervous system have to kick into its survival mechanisms, right? Meaning it has to then super compensate, meaning, right? Applying all that pressure inside our nervous system in the form of anxiety, not motivation, anxiety, that will cause us to act in and behave in these super compensated ways so that we can get that external validation, that approval from the world where we've placed that authority as high achievers. Because that external validation, it feels like a supplement for our self-worth. It basically is validating the belief that we are good enough. And I like to say, for high achievers, they do a lot to avoid their emotional experience, right? They believe that being in tune to their emotions puts them into this really out of control place and space. And so their antidote in the super compensated way is to avoid their emotions, right? To suppress, repress, and deny their emotional experience. So us being able to consciously start to see ourselves in terms of how we're feeling, yes, even when it's uncomfortable, that's what actually helps us get to that next step of depth in terms of the deeper meaning that our brain has had hardwired, downloaded, inherited, right? At a time and a space and a place where we were like a sponge. There was not a lot of consciousness going on in terms of us understanding that these were the messages that were being programmed in our self-concept. So that's where we go. We go all the way to the I-facing belief in terms of, this must mean that I inherently am not good enough. That's where the imposter syndrome lived. That's exactly where the work needed to go down consciously. So that's where we actually need to start to get to work in terms of practicing the intelligence. All of this awareness is obviously what helps us to locate where that conscious, work needs to go down in terms of the mindset, strategy, architecture. And the way we do that is by getting super duper duper curious, because that curiosity is what then helps us start to remove ourselves, from being completely absorbed by the limited perspective or belief. This is what starts to open up resources. This is what starts to get us on higher ground. This is actually what helps us become the observer with all of our consciousness, that's our authentic self. The person witnessing the backstories and the red flag emotions and the situations and all of that we can critically think about from a point of observation, that's your authentic self. She's the one who intuitively can then start to question the validity of these backstories, right? And actually remember that she is the authority. I am the authority. I'm an adult now. I'm not a kid who needs to be told what I can do and not do and agree with it and then go along with it. I have conscious choice. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where the power lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where we pivot from powerless to powerful, is when we actually get up on that higher ground as our adult selves. And we can actually self-authorize, meaning we can be the authority who decides, you know what? That's not really true. Like that limited belief is an untruth. There's no validity to that, right? And that's where we can actually start to get to work in terms of consciously starting to come back home to the truth of who we are. And that's again our intuition that starts to speak up louder than our fears and our self-doubts when we're at that home consciously in our self-leadership. And
Mm-hmm.
once we just start to question the validity, it's really easy for us to start to dismiss all of these really limited perspectives from when we were younger and really consciously start to select narratives, beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stories of proof and evidence that are actually in alignment with what is true, which is that we are all inherently good enough. And that never changes, right? Like every single one of us has value to bring. This is what I worked on with Anne, is helping her understand. Like the goal is not to be perfect on day one. That's absurd and totally impossible. And there's a reason that you got this promotion into this leadership position in the first place. Take a look inside. What do you think they saw in that sweet spot of yours that even had them thinking you would be a good leader? You know, and that's where we get to actually see all the proof and evidence of the truth of the value that is us, our skills, our talents, our strengths, our attributes, the things that make us uniquely, that are always inside of us, and thus always proof and evidence that is in our control, that we can tap into, tune into, right? Pay attention to, for the purposes of really starting to open up shop cognitively, right? Because when we're in these red flag emotional states, it puts us into the tunnel and we can't really see much.
Mm-hmm.
But when we actually start to see ourselves, which is the counter to the imposter syndrome, that's when we see the value that we have to bring. And if the goal is to just show up every day and give her, meaning do the best I can with the capacity I have in my sweet spot, then boom, that's a goal that my brain is always in control of. And thus, that's confidence I can always elicit, which helps
I
us
love that.
step into our flow and actually show up predictably and reliably and consistently doing our best work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no such thing as better than that, folks. That's literally the best we can do, right? But it actually gives us the capacity from a state perspective, meaning the quality of conversation going on between my brain and my body, to be able to show up and literally step into my flow.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you talked about proof and evidence, because I think that is really, really an important step in like the journey of, understanding who you are, and without being able to like really create that highlight reel, as you so call it, right?
Yeah.
All those wonderful things that you have done that people see, that have been proven, because there's reasons why you're showing up to these occasions that you're being selected to do, but you
Mm-hmm.
haven't tapped in or haven't taken note of it yet, because
Mm-hmm.
you haven't stepped out or had somebody hold a mirror. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's an exercise that is really important for people to do as part of that journey, right? To be able to see all your sweet spots, because we're also told as children, and depending on your culture, but you know don't boast, don't say you're good at this,
Mm-hmm.
keep yourself small. Everybody's equal, everybody's a winner,
Mm-hmm.
everybody is the same. We're not. The reality
Mm-hmm.
is we all have pluses, we all have negatives too, but to be able to tap into those pluses, to start that proof and evidence of like all the wonderful capabilities and skills we have, and the shining little rocks we have inside of us, to be able to like really build that case to say I am amazing. That's a really, really important piece of that whole exercise, right? I think the other thing you can help us with is, what are the questions we should ask ourselves when we get into those high pressure situations where we start seeing ourselves as like not good enough or imposter, we start like panicking, oh my God, I can't do this. I think you have some techniques for us that you could share to help our guests kind of, when they face this is what the things you are working with them on to help them get through that. And it's not a one and done, by the way. It's something that, but it are tools that you can use all the time, right?
Yeah, I think beliefs are like tabletops. I always like to give this example. They need legs of proof to exist, right? And that's why we got to go into our backstories as the conscious observer with curiosity. So we can like figure out what proof and evidence is this belief system using in my backstories to try to justify and validate that this actually is true about me. Obviously, if that's what is upholding the limited perspectives, that's also where we got to go when we start to architect the empowering beliefs, is that we have to learn, and this is the learning how to see ourselves, which is counter to the imposter, right? The imposter looks for proof and evidence from the world, like it's J-O-B. Every day I need proof and evidence from the world. If I have one leadership presentation where I don't have evidence that I am the best in the room, right? Then all of a sudden I'm an imposter. I'm a failure. Like that's pretty drastic assessment, right? So yeah, I think the pivot here in terms of the highlight reel is like, yeah, again, that's something that is always inside of you. Your highlight reel of the best, experiences that you had of impact and influence. And again, for Anne, getting her to see examples of where she had leadership attributes that were showing up on the play, even as an all-star individual contributor, right? And when we actually can develop a reel, meaning we've got these like visualization scripts or these banked memories that house all that proof and evidence of who we are when we're in our flow, who we are when we show up in alignment with that which makes us valuable in terms of the best unique things that we have to contribute to the world. That's something that is always going to be accessible. Yeah, even when you're in the room and your temperatures are starting to rise because you notice some big players are in that room, right? Or you understand the stakes associated with that first presentation to your new team as a new leader. It's like understanding where to go in your self-leadership consciously so that you can start to see the proof and evidence, right? That starts to open that perspective up. And that ultimately is what the self-regulation of this state requires, right? So that we can actually have enough of that proof and evidence substantiated, right? Behind the empowering perspective that we need to proactively adopt so that we can feel the way we need to feel, to have access to the resources we need to have access to show up and do the very best that we can with the capacity we have. So I think the highlight reel is a very popular one with my high achiever folks, because again, it's just an example of how quick a shift you can get with these NLP strategies, right? It's like, how long does that take you to run a highlight reel when you're sitting there and you're in a meeting and you're just trying to regulate? It doesn't, you've had lots of experience working with that tool, right? And probably using it with your teams too, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about it a lot to help them it's an easy one, right? And it helps us kind of like make that connection as to why you're maybe being chosen to do whatever task you are, because then you can see the value and the sweet spot you have there, right? So it's a really important one. And that's one also helps you build confidence, right? I've seen that shift in people where they really understand themselves. And then it also may even lead you to some more alignment in terms of what role you should be playing in the workplace in some cases, right? So maybe there's, you finally define, you look at your highlight reel and you say, wow, there's a lot going on over here, maybe on the communication influential side, but you're stuck in a role where you don't get to do lots of that. Maybe you want to bring that out, and then that can take you on a trajectory of different roles and success, right? Because you really understand where your sweet spots are and where you're really skilled, why you're here, when we talk about conscious leadership, it's like, why am I here? What gifts do I have to give the world? And if you can get that alignment and really see it, and then kind of get really close in on that, and then you can make choices to move that one forward. It might take you in a totally different path, which I think is like, that's like amazing, right? So keeping that view open and kind of just being open to any possibility and just trusting, we all have these special little gifts and that makes us unique. And if you can tap into those and then take those forward and kind of, if they're real gifts and they're really a value and alignment with you, you will take it forward, right? And you will find success with that. But the awareness piece doesn't happen just magically. And some people might even have, we call it awareness, but actually might think they're really good at something and they're really not. So like really being conscious and going into that highly real will help kind of decipher really where those sweet spots are.
Yeah.
So I do use that a lot because it's an easy one, especially when people are down and struggling. It's an easy one that I can actually hold a mirror for them to help them see that. So even as a leader, as a coach, I mean, you do it in the chair, but I do it in a different chair. It's to help our people, right? At the end of the day, and holding a mirror up for people, good or bad. Good one really does help them kind of build that confidence that they need just to get back up, and then giving them that task to go do on their own, because sometimes sitting and reflecting, you might actually go back, like you said, in memory, in terms of, experiences you've had to actually prove that. And we forget lots of that stuff. So writing it down is also another trick that you share with us that, really
Psychomotor.
to kind of get that registered, you really need to use the pen and paper. Right?
Psychomotor processing is some of the deepest form of processing, aside from this, externalizing like this or externalizing like, just get it out of your subconscious mind, please. I think this is the thing that is so astonishing to me. When I first started coming into this corporate world and starting to work with corporate high achievers, is like, I can't believe that our people are not set up this way. It's the same thing I saw in sports. Why did it take me getting to a top 1% opportunity in order to start being fed the puck in terms of all of these amazing strategies, right? And how important it is to see ourselves and become the expert in thyself, right? Like, I just think it's that stat I threw out, the world's foremost researcher and thus expert on the topic of self-awareness, Tashi Urich. She did this research where she said, well, 95% of us think we're highly self-aware, kind of like we all think we're great drivers. Only 10% of us, it turns out, actually are. That's an incredible gap, right? But I think that is, to me, why it's so important for leaders to get this type of development. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people looking at me like, wow, when we first start to roll out this set of tools in the toolbox with our leadership development, and it's because they've never thought to go to that step of depth with their people before. And it's so important. You can speak to this, right? Because our people are not necessarily having that privilege of getting access to a leader that even knows to go that deep with them in their self-leadership.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that, through my journey working with you, and I also did, your coaching certification, just to be a better leader, right? To be able to help my people through these difficult times, right? And not even difficult times. I mean, some of the sessions and some of the locker rooms we have at Nokia, I mean, people will write to me and say, I'm a better father, I'm a better mother, I'm happier in my life. Like, that's just not even just work related. This is like life related and life changing, right? Which is why I think it's so, important as a leader. If you want to be a leader, it's not just about, execution of work. It's about being responsible for other people's development, about their happiness, about helping and supporting them through their roles, right? And it's kind of an honor to do that, but you also need to be equipped to do that. And I see it and I've felt it and I've, experienced it myself, but there's a lot of pressure in the workplace. And I'm not speaking specific workspaces. I think everybody in the workplace has lots of pressures. And as you move up, the more pressure you get. You have to be able to sit and be able to take that pressure and be able to be in self, confidence and not imposter, to be able to stay really clear on the mission that you need to go on. If you don't, it's very, very difficult, and you can get destabilized so quickly, which is not fun for the people, and that relates to then their happiness and how they feel and how they treat other people. Like, there's huge impacts in the way that our emotions are triggered in the workplace, but also at home. And that can really destabilize their teammates or other people outside of the group, but more importantly, how they feel about themselves, which then will bring other feelings and emotions that may not be positive for everybody around them, right? Including their families. So this is why this is such an important mission that, I joined you on, because I saw the change and the shift in my own experience, right, over the last 5 years. And I want to share that with others. And I want others to feel the way that I feel now, the way that I can step into, high pressure situation and know who I am and what I can bring, and knock out the judgment around me, because that stuff's not true. That's my own kind of thought. If that's coming up for me, that's because that doesn't necessarily mean that's happening. It's a belief. And we didn't talk about it, but maybe something else we need to talk about on a different pod. But one of the things that I found was really, really, really cool was tying why these beliefs were there. We didn't talk about that. First is identifying the belief. But man, when you can go back and sit back and remember the day that your parent told you something that started that belief, it's like, wow, all that has carried me to here, and it served me for a certain purpose of my life and a certain time in my life, but no longer now will it help me achieve what I'm looking for. So being able to unpack that and understand it, because it's not, people will say, well, beliefs, you could deny and say that they're, well, how do you know they're not true? Or how do you, but you can see how they're formed. When you can make that connection on how they were formed, you go, that is true. But it was never meant to be that. But not talking about, we talked about that, but you're a little person, you're just trying to survive. You don't have the capacity to be able to decipher that. What does that mean? You're a child. But all that conditioning is put on us, and then we're going through our life. And if we actually don't stop and step back and unpack, we're still running on the same beliefs that we were given when we were like a little kid. That's not safe.
I think it's fascinating. I honestly think it's my favorite part of educating grown-ass people, adults on, it turns out your self-concept was established pre-10 years old. And I agree. It's like there's something very powerful to being able to shuttle back to that little girl on the couch, handing her dad 99% all proud and being told, what happened to the 1%, or getting in the back seat after throwing her hockey bag in the trunk. 2 goals. Why did you get the hat trick? There's something very powerful about my adult self going back, because I'm a mother now. I have a daughter, and it helps me to be super conscious in terms of some of the feedback I'm giving her. But also to know, my dad was he's the OG high performance coach. He just thought that was the way, because it was for him back in the day, from a space and place of scarcity and survival is set the bar high, and you believe in the potential of that little girl clearly, or you probably wouldn't even be saying things like that, right? All of that is what just helps you. I'm smiling as I'm saying that now, because I have pulled that out of the, depths of my unconscious experience. And now I can see it for what it was. It's that was my dad trying to coach me and get me to excellence, because he believed I could. He saw that potential in me.
But the question is there a different way of doing it? And I think that's what you teach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's even a different pod when we talk about how we can impact others and our children by doing this work.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the whole self piece where it starts, in terms of like, who am I? Where do I want to go? How can I help myself? But then there's so many, there's so many steps to it, and it just keeps going. And then when you see the impact and the reasons why you might do it, is to really kind of, maybe you do want to be a better parent. And when you have that intel, you can't, again, it comes back to conscious leadership, making that call. Do I go this way or that way? Because I know there's two ways to do this. There's not just one, which our parents, a lot of the times, there was only one way because they didn't have the intel. And we have the possibility to have that now, which is what you offer. So thank you.
Aw, thank you for helping me pull all of that out of the well today. You giving us all those contextual examples in terms of how this shows up on your corporate leadership play. I feel like people have a hard time making that case. But hello, we're talking about imposter syndrome today, which is fueled by fear and like stress and anxiety and all of that, which completely disengages our people and even our brain. This is why, high achievers burn out, is because they don't recognize that stress. They think it's motivation, right? When they're leading themselves in these ways unconsciously. Super powerful riff on imposter syndrome. I feel like this concept, probably will show up on the play along the way some more, but that's what it is for today. We don't want to take up too much more of your time. We are in the year of co-creation still, and this feedback is gold. So please keep sending your feedback and letting us know how this new conscious leadership concept is resonating with you. If there's anything in particular you got showing up in your high achiever mindset that you want us to really go deep in the well to explore, we want to hear about that. If you have some ideas in terms of some experts or guests that you would like us to interview and get down into their wells with, we'd also love that feedback. So you can send me an email, susan@elitehighperformance.com, with all your valuable insights and ideas and contributions, and we thank you for that. Tracey, do you have any final words for our folks today before we let them out these locker room doors?
No, I'm good. I want to say thank you for sharing all that good stuff for us and coming off a big talk with our Nokia friends. So thank you for sharing that. It was awesome.
What I said at the start of that talk is absolutely true. This is definitely one of the topics that I am most passionate about, this whole concept of empowerment. I feel like, really teeing this up for leaders. I was saying to that Strong Her locker room, if you're sitting there and saying, oh, but I'm not a leader, Susan, you keep talking about leadership and leader. We're all leaders. We're all leading ourselves, right? Every single day when we show up in the world. Okay. So I'm so, so, so pleased that we got to have a conscious conversation about all of that, because I think this is how we're going to change the way the game is being played forever in business. When it needs it more than ever, because the uncertainty is ripe, that means the stress is high, and we can see based on our conversation today, it takes you out of the room. It takes you away from the helm. So much in this podcast today for everybody to resonate on. If anybody is curious about that practicing the pivot framework that I just ran us through, you can also email me and ask me to send that to you. I will definitely get that in your inbox. For all other inquiries in regards to this awesome style of, high performance coaching using the NLP we've been talking about the last two podcasts, you can head on over to the website elitehighperformance.com. Please share this episode with a friend or a colleague you're looking to call to this conscious leadership development table. That's it. That's all for us here at the LLP. We'll see you all next week.